Hey there, John.
Hey, Juan, good to see you. Beautiful landscape there. The city of Bangkok. Welcome. So, Juan, why don't you fill in the blanks for our viewers? Give them the download, if you will, that's not necessarily highlighted in the flyer of what's going to take place at the Fraud Fighter Summit.
Well, actually, we have Jim Caviezel's new movie, the Dark Horse. Yeah, it's just called Dark Horse, not the Dark Horse. But,
Hmm.
uh, if you liked what Jim did in uh, his last movie there, Sound of Freedom,
Sound of Freedom.
I think you'll really enjoy this one here. And Jim actually has said that as far as acting, within the role of an actor, he's done movies like Count of Monte Cristo and others that were just epic movies in his TV show stuff. He says this is actually the best role that he's ever played as far as his own acting career type of stuff so far. And of course, he played Christ and
Hmm.
did a phenomenal job there. Got struck by lightning while he was
Yeah.
during the course of the thing. Amazing stuff. But, so we'll see. We're premiering that movie at the event. That's something that came up after I'd already scheduled the event and started it, and so we were just going to have hors d'oeuvres on that Monday evening. People get ready for the event starting the next day. Um, sometimes you show up the day of an event and then you go to it. We're starting off so intensely right off the bat on that Tuesday morning, the 16th, that, I've encouraged people to show up the evening before so they can go right into those meetings. And in fact, I don't want people leaving. So we provided full meals the whole time, catered, just, roll coffee or something, but full breakfast. So when we originally priced it at $350 a person, we were really only doing breakfast, lunch, dinner on Tuesday, and breakfast, lunch on Wednesday, and then people leaving Wednesday afternoon. We didn't change the pricing because I added things, and I didn't want to have later people have to pay more or something than the early ones that checked in or whatever, purchased tickets. And so I added dinner instead of just hors d'oeuvres that evening, a full dinner, and then we're doing the movie, which um, this is the world premiere. Uh, Directors and producers and marketing people, they get a little stressed because you got their babies. So I actually had to go out and purchase a world class, best available out there in the world right now, LED screen for this event. Uh, 12 by 22, so you get a real theater experience, get all the sound just right. They're actually delivering that tomorrow and setting it up for the presentation so that everybody's for sure going to get just a world class experience. And then, of course, a full meal, popcorn. You wouldn't believe what it costs with unions and everything else to do popcorn for 700 people. Uh, but we went ahead and added that. So it really is. Yeah, there's probably still a few tickets available, but we're right there. And if anybody wants to go, we're $350. You're getting 7 meals, full meals. Where can you do that for $350? Plus, get a world premiere movie. Plus, get some of these great speakers. One of them you mentioned, J. Edward Griffin, wrote the book Creature from Jekyll Island. Now he's got his new book, which is really he's in his late 80s, and it's very hard for him to travel. He actually wanted to be there in person, but he's got another event in July. And by the way, he's going to get to use this screen that I just purchased for that event. We've made that available to him so he can improve his event. But travels, the son of a gun from Montana, for him. So he's remoting in. But don't think for a second that that's not a big deal. Of course, you'll see him on the big screen there, but his swan song, if you will, probably his last big work, his book, think of the lifetime of work that he's done related to the Federal Reserve, money, these various players within the global economic system. And he's got his latest book coming out. He'll be talking about that during the event. We'll have a few of them that'll be on hand for us at the event. And, um, we're going to get to hear him first, really, concerning what his new book's about and the things that are important to him right here at this event. And even though he's remoting in, it'll be a very quality experience, and he's not doing other events other than this, and then his own in-person live one. So that's really a very big deal, and I'm looking forward to that as much as I am all the other speakers in person. By the way, the movie Dark Horse is about President Bolsonaro and his run to become elected as the Brazilian president, and then the theft of his election in 2020 and subsequent impeachment and then throwing him in prison. Do you understand? That's exactly what this global clan had intended for President Trump and for America. And by the way, it wasn't just Brazil and then America. They accomplished the same thing in South Korea. The president of South Korea declared a national emergency. And because of the way, after their midterm, what amounts to their midterm elections, because of the way Brazil or South Korean politics is set up, they have an independent vote counting registration operation that's separate from the parties. In order for the president to go in and audit that, he had to declare a national emergency. Then he sent troops in to obtain some of the server records in that facility because he believed that the election had been frauded. We know that it was frauded. And they got the wrong records. They were 180 degrees out of phase locating what they were looking for. So when he lifted the national emergency under pressure, hours later, they didn't have what they thought they had. So he was then impeached for having declared a national emergency for political purposes, went to prison. And then here the other day, as I was mentioning to you when we were together in Bangkok the other day, John, before President Trump would go wheels up to go to China the other day, he sent Secretary of the Treasury Besant to South Korea, and he was met there in Seoul by his Chinese counterpart out of China, and they had a little discussion. And as a result of that discussion, which was more than just the financial stuff, an agreement was reached. And because China was the one that was actually manipulating the politics in South Korea and had done all the vote fraud stuff, China had its tongs into all of the various political players. And so when President Trump lifted off and went to China, while he was in China, the president of South Korea was released from prison. And the process has now begun to unravel because we have the data of how that election in South Korea was cooked and China's involvement in stealing that election and then all of the politics to put the president in prison. China's having to back off on a bunch of positions. And in fact, they have been forewarned that here in the U.S., we are going to expose the involvement of certain players in China from a military standpoint, also, by the way, to attack America on its elections and steal elections in America, not just 2020, but other elections before and since. So with that in mind, Trump did go to China. He's back, obviously. And what's happening over the next 30 days or less than days now is the office as the director of national intelligence at the end of June, not leaving office with a whimper. Her husband is sick, has a very, very rare form of cancer, and is fighting to survive this. She's going to step aside and focus on her husband and her family, as she should. But before she goes, in this last, less than 30 days now, she's going to release documentation showing China's interference in our elections, foreign interference, interference going through Venezuela, Serbia, some of our NATO partners into the American election system, electronic, as well as paper ballots, and then money flow. As she releases that, America is going to have to come to grips with what's happened to us with these stolen elections and getting people into power who were not the will of the American people, as well as other countries around the world. Remember, I've told your audience previously and other audiences that the people who had frauded these elections did so in 71 countries plus the United States. And they did it for money, they did it for power, did it to control us. That's what G. Edward Griffin's going to talk about, is the money side of these control mechanisms. Why would you want to fraud people into office? Because then they help to get your projects move forward, your real estate protected, your military operations funded. And so it's more than just getting your buddy in office, for some local little project. These are world uh, changing events when you get people into these high offices all around the world, and spending money in ways that favor you and not the other guy. What advantage would China have picking the leader of South Korea? Well, they're right there funding North Korea and other operations around the world, including the nuclear projects in North Korea. And so getting the leaders they want into office is a big deal, and it affects the whole world. So what President Trump also, by the way, is doing is he's checking boxes all over the world. Um, Iran has to be uh, brought under control before we get to the main events here, legally, politically, with arrests in America, with prosecutions in America for vote fraud. And remember, the Russia Gate stuff was about getting Hillary into office. It was about obstructing President Trump's ability to uh, do what we voted him into office to do as president in his first term. It blocked him from being able to proceed forward in many lanes. It was traitorous to obstruct the president from being able to follow through on his agenda that he was voted into office to do. So uh, the vote stuff, the subsequent obstruction with the Russia lies, and the money, the way it's being spent, the wars that have been being protected and pushed forward. Trump would never have gone into Ukraine and allowed that to happen the way it did had he been president. So the whole Ukraine conflict, with millions and millions and millions dead and many, many more times injured, and the total cost, the destruction, for what? To what value, really? Is there anything that's been won, let alone everything that's been lost by both sides in Ukraine, that was of any gain? It's about covering the money trail for money laundering and political laundering out into the world, using Ukraine as that choke point. And that's what the global cabal wants. So anyway, probably answered more than you asked, but there's the answer.
Thank you, Juan. I want to pedal back just a couple of things before we move into a variety of topics I
Oh, and
know are on
let
the
me say
mind.
one thing too. Let me say one thing too, real quick. And so RFK has expressed interest in being at the event, virtually or in person, but that has not been confirmed yet. And so
Mhm.
you mentioned that earlier on, and so we're kind of standing by on that. I don't want to read something in that's not actually occurred yet. So anyway, but we have so many other people that are there in person and want to be present. And just a little side note, I do intend to do something in two other realms, hopefully before the end of the year, one of them being on the medical side uh, uh, with conference, and the other one within a very specific category of the legal realm. And I don't want to let that cat out of the bag quite yet, but we're looking into logistics on that, and I'm very concerned to move forward with that. So there'll be other announcements, probably a month or two off, but we're already working on those because I think they're important subject matter that a lot of your listeners will want to attend or watch. And by the way, just as you mentioned, we're doing the live in-person event. I can't show, you won't be able to live stream out the movie Dark Horse. That's the world premiere. It won't come out in theaters until sometime late in the year. But this is the world premiere of the movie, and it'll be the editor's cut. What you see in the movie theaters might not be as long as the editor's cut, but it's like Sound of Freedom. I liked what I took around the world, around the country with Sound of Freedom, the cut that Mel Gibson did, which was about 14 minutes longer than what was actually released in the theaters. And I think it was the best cut of all. I think that'll be the case here with our screening of Dark Horse. What actually ends up in the theaters might be a little bit shorter just because they tend to do that. So you're getting a real treat if you're able to attend in person, but that will not be live streamed. The rest, the question and answer after the movie, and the rest of the conference, we're putting it out there for free through you and some other hosts. And so that those that can't afford to, drop everything, go to Vegas or whatever, or the timing doesn't work, you'll be able to listen to it live and recorded and for free. We're not charging anything. And, a lot of this stuff they end up charging for, participating. It's not what we're doing. In fact, the other thing is that we're not having any vendors. I've had numerous requests to allow vendors to be at the event. But I specifically with stuff that I've done, I prefer not to do that because it tends to clutter the area for what we're trying to do. And we also have security stuff there. I want to have a more open environment without any distractions, where the conference is so critical, the information we have out there is so critical that it's a little different flavor, and we may allow vendors at some of the later stuff. This specific one, though, no vendors. So anyway, and the same for the live stream. We're putting that out there for free, so I don't need anybody to, sponsor it or spend money in the normal sense. We may do that at other events at another time, but not this time around.
Understood. Thank you, Juan. I'm very happy that Mr. G's got a new book coming out. I was not aware of that. I had the opportunity to do conferences with him many years ago in Tampa, Florida, and Colorado. I would hope that the president, I've said this before, would give Mr. G that I think it's called the Freedom Medal that they give to civilians for his work on Creature and many, many other subjects he's taken on. Can you briefly tell us what Dark Horse is going to be about?
Well, it's about Bolsonaro is run for the presidency, knifed him in the back, became the president, and then they did this election fraud to keep him from being able to re-win the presidency. South American politics being what it is, I will say there's allegations that he got in there through some type of crooked elections and like that. They addressed some of that in the movie. I know from years and years ago, and he was, we in a morning drink, and he said, that he had been approached the previous day and basically told that he had two choices. silver or lead, and it shook him up tremendously. And because you the politics in that region are so um, cooked, frauded, etc. And he was very, very, very disturbed. How could he do what he wanted to do without either accepting a bribe or going straight against the money people running the country? And he ended up having to step out of the race, claimed a medical issue, and stepped out of the race to protect his family. Um, that's been politics in South America, but I would also add it's not that far different from politics here in the U.S. Look at the threats that President Trump has gone through, not just for himself, but his whole family. Think of General Flynn when he finally confessed guilt to something that never happened, never occurred, is because they were threatening to go after his son. And that was a bridge too far. It's one thing when you're going out there and putting your well-being on the line. It's another thing for other family members who have no say. And these monsters are going to come after you to, um, try to force you into or out of a position or an office. And that all had to get unwound with a presidential pardon. That's the kind of cooked um, politics, finance that we've been facing in the world for a very long time. That's what Trump is addressing and trying to take the energy out of, including, by the way, doing these actions overseas to make it so that as we move to domestic issues related to the election and related to finance, the globalista have less and less things that they can pull us off point on, that they can distract us through the media on. Imagine if he hadn't dealt with Iran and we're getting ready to do prosecutions and arrests and like that, and suddenly we're in the middle of a Mideast war, or fuel prices are going to get raised to outer space. So he's checking these other boxes and neutralizing threats within what we could be presented with as a nation in order to get to the stuff here at home with the cooked elections, Russia Gate, stuff like that, something in the Korean Peninsula. Um, yeah, by the way, one of the things when President Trump was over in China the other day, China had been covertly positioning ships, both their own uh, and other countries, uh, some pretty disparate, over key uh, locations where these undersea data cables run, and was threatening the U.S. that they could disrupt the world's financial stability if accidentally they drug an anchor, if certain drones with explosives were brought near to certain of these locations. And so part of the meeting with Ascent and his Chinese counterpart concerning the threat to the global economy was that we would not be tolerating any type of interference in that area. And in fact, while Ascent was in flight to China, President Trump met with a large number of generals that are brought in on an emergency basis to the White House. They were briefed, and purportedly, the information in those briefs related to what we would have to do militarily if any of those ships so much as sneezed in the direction of an information data pipeline, these undersea cables. China can act all innocent and pretend that they have nothing to do with it. It's all an accident. Um, uh, our side, our generals were advised to have a plan in place to respond instantaneously to any such threats. We're not going to let the information flow around the world be damaged and live, in some kind of a Mexican hat dance standoff with China. They think that we live in a glass house, that they live in a glass house, including financially. We will act before they get a chance to damage that information flow, not after. And that was made excruciatingly clear in those meetings. Besides the fact that we're coming, don't threaten us over releasing information about their interference in our elections, Russia Gate, etc. We are going to do that. Nothing's going to stop informing the world what's been going on. And then, by the way, it's not just about getting the elections right here in America for 2026 and moving forward. It's about us getting our election right and elections right, and then going out to the rest of the world where these frauds have taken place and assisting them in getting honest elections in all these other 71 countries where the elections have been frauded. We're going to take control back of the free world and take the noose off from around the neck of people all over the world. And then we're going to do trade. We're going to work together. They're going to make money working with America. America's going to make money working with them. And that's what we've told China, straighten up and fly right. You're not going to steal wealth from other countries and get away with it anymore. You're going to pay market prices for oil and natural gas. You're not getting it at some steep discount because of corruption. You're going to have to compete on an even basis, a fair playing field with us and everybody else. And you're going to stop with the mischief. And if you don't want to, you live in the glass house, not us. The whole world is going to be scrutinizing China and what it's been doing for a very long time, manipulating governments all over the world. And that's this next phase we're moving into. As far as what that looks like precisely, in the world, across the whole world right now, with all the dramas going on, overall, it's about a Category 2 storm. It's going to get a lot more intense. I would say before it's done, we end up with a Cat 6, but it will be brief, and we're going to get it back under control. It's the process. Trump's not backing off. He has two things that he intends to conclude during his presidency, to the extent that it's possible by any group or individuals in the world, and that is honest elections and honest money. And on the way, they're going to crack a few eggs and stop the bullshit led predominantly by these globalists to working through China. China's being controlled themselves behind the scenes, and we're going to loosen those controls even of China. So there you go.
Well, that's music to the world's ears, the realignment of China's manipulation in the world and what President Trump and others are doing. I want to talk about Tina Peters real quickly. When I was in Bangkok with you the other day, you mentioned that there's a possibility Tina may or may not appear. Any comments about Tina attending the summit or anything in general as to what life is going to look like for her a little bit down the line?
Well, she intends to be there in person at the conference. We've made arrangements for that. The parole board has put recommendations in, but it actually comes down to the parole officer. And they can't, they're not going to get away with controlling her political speech, her free speech rights. That's part of why the appeal was sent, appeals board sent back the a case for resentencing, because the sentence the judge imposed was intended to stop her political free speech and to penalize her further because of things she said publicly, which were her total right as an American citizen to say, her civil rights. And so that was clear in everything. They do have the ability to affect travel and things like that. And so those are in flux this exact second. She's got medical things that need to be addressed, some of it in Nevada. And so we're of the belief at this exact moment, time of the broadcast, that she's in fact going to get to be present at the Las Vegas event. We've made accommodations accordingly. But, there's plenty in play, and, not all of it's just, the legal. There's political in there too. So we'll work through that. She can attend virtually, and just like G. Edward Griffin, you'll get a great shot with her. But she wants to be there. She wants to enjoy the movie. She wants to enjoy hearing the other speakers and be present. And so that's the intent. And a lot of the friends, such as Roseanne Barr, who is also a friend of ours, going to be there. I've got a number of friends of Tina from around the country that are flying in the expectation that we're going to get to have her present at the conference. And so that's the plan. But, if you're attending solely just to meet Tina, I would say it's in flux. And so I wouldn't want somebody, misread in on that or something. But she wants to be there. We want her there. And some of it's in play with the way that the parole happens out of Colorado.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you. I we'll be streaming it, and to those that are home watching the streaming event, if Tina appears, either remotely or on stage, boy, you're going to feel the love wherever you are in the world watching this. It's going to be incredible. Juan, to my producer, put up image 6 and 7. Let's see where that takes me. All right, I'd like to switch gears, Juan. This has kind of just occurred. Uh, Axios reports that Trump told Netanyahu in their latest phone call, "You're effing crazy. You'd be in prison if it weren't for me. I'm saving your ass. Everybody hates you now. Everybody hates Israel because of this." Next image, I want to read this and have you weigh in, Juan. Okay, President Trump published this not too long ago. I had a conversation with Bibi today asking him not to go into a major raid of Beirut, Lebanon. He turned his troops around. Thank you, Bibi. I also had a conversation with representatives of the leaders of Hezbollah, and they agreed to stop shooting at Israel and its soldiers. Likewise, Israel agreed to stop shooting at them. Let's see how long that lasts. Hopefully, it will be for an eternity. President Donald J. Trump, of course, the art of the deal, trying to create peace around this world. But what's and I'll throw this out there because I know our viewers would be remiss if I didn't ask. Q, of course, stated save Israel for last. Now we have this narrative, this kind of statements coming from the president concerning Bibi Netanyahu. What's your comments or views about any of the things I've just laid out?
I've done long diatribes concerning Israel, and I'll just try to, as briefly as possible, state it again for right here, right now. The intent has been by this globalista crowd that they want to create a third world war based on a religious battle between the three Abrahamic religions. All three, the Muslim, the Jewish, and the Christian religions, which are considered the Abrahamic religions, who claim Abraham as their great ancestor, children of Abraham, to get these brothers fighting each other, okay, these half brothers fighting each other. It's the devil's way. And we fight each other, take each other out, and then they step into the vacuum. So the intent has always been, and by the way, Albert Pike, who wrote what essentially amounts to the Bible for Masons, and remember, Washington, D.C., London, and many of the cities of the world are built around Masonic imagery, connections, secret handshake groups behind the scenes. Those groups are working together, not just the Masons, but a number of other, Club of Rome, World Economic Forum, the Davos crowd, on and on and on. A number of these groups all working together with the intent that they're going to build on the two First World Wars with a third where there's this fight, a religious battle, a religious fight. And in the aftermath of that, they declare a new world order, a singular entity ruling the world. And Albert Pike wrote about this in the mid 1800s in his book Morals and Dogma. And he says right in the middle of the book that it would take 3 world wars to create a one world government, of which they would.
Come back to me there. Thank you. Okay, we've got you back, Juan. You cut out there
And then
talking about the,
I had a
free
call.
world.
Yeah, I had a
Gotcha.
call coming in.
Okay,
I apologize. Uh,
understood.
and so Albert Pike uh, proposed in his book Morals and Dogma that there would be a one world government that would be the outgrowth of three world wars. So think about that. Somewhere behind the scenes, people were orchestrating governments around the world to work through World War One to bring it about, World War Two to bring it about, and then they have a third world war in mind that they believe if they can pull it off, allows them to create a one world government. They step into the vacuum of destruction, out of chaos, order, and rule the world with their little secret handshake organization. And by the way, in the middle of the book, Morals and Dogma, first off, he dedicates the book to the entity, the spirit that gave him all the guidance in order to write down what he wrote down concerning how to bring about a one world government. He dedicates the book by writing it in green ink in honor of the entity that explained all these things to him, who was green. Uh, you know, their thing is, uh, he says, let there be no misunderstanding. The God whom we serve is Lucifer. Okay, so Albert Pike says that Masons are serving Lucifer. And they have all their religious talk, all their, stuff out in plain sight. But the guy that wrote the book says that they serve Lucifer, uh, the entity that beguiled Eve, where he hid amongst the green leaves of the garden, camouflaged until Adam wasn't around, and then went and beguiled, which has sexual innuendo, by the way, Eve. With that in mind, these people have moved into positions of authority all over the world. By the way, it's not just a Masonic theme, for example, in Washington, D.C. and other capitals around the world. In Baghdad, when you went into Baghdad, the whole city was built around Masonic themes and angles and imagery and everything else, just like Washington, D.C. Okay? Why? Because they're everywhere. With that in mind, the money crowd behind the scenes, when Israel was in the Palestinian district for England, it was a handshake agreement, the signing Balfour Declaration, 1917, between Lord Rothschild and Lord Balfour, that set aside that um, the Zionists, a Jewish group, money group, could buy land in the Palestine district with it in mind that when they reached a certain amount of land that was purchased and owned, that they could then declare a new nation of Israel for the Jews. And 30 years later, 1947, after World War II, they in fact did decide to declare themselves a nation. They were recognized in 48 by the UN, a Rockefeller operation. Remember, the Rockefeller brothers and their friends created the UN. That wasn't just altruistic business people and political people coming together. It was specifically orchestrated, built. The land was donated by Nelson Rockefeller, where the UN Center sits today. And they did these negotiations even during the war to create this entity to replace the League of Nations, which had been what they'd worked with coming into World War One and out of World War One, refining their ideas on the way to creating a new world order. Israel is a political creation of moneyed parties within a certain cabal, many of whom were Jewish, in order to create this stumbling block for the world. So the current modern day Israel has many Christians, many people of faith, by the way, many Muslims. I had a friend who was amongst the Jewish leadership that came into Jerusalem after the Six-Day War in 1967 and were greeted by Muslim leaders who then took them on the tour of Jerusalem of all the sites that they had preserved and did it as brothers, half brothers, um, to show information they had about the history, about locations. And my Jewish friend that did that walk said this was not adversarial. This was done with an understanding that they saw the world differently in many ways, but they both claimed Abraham as their great ancestor father. And that's why even the negotiations for peace today are called the Abraham Accords, trying to come up with a way to work together. Now, with all that in mind, you look at Israel, this political creation out of the city of London, the banking, monetary stuff, and London proper, with the crown influence and the 13 royal families. Remember, it's not just the British royal family, there's 13 royal families that want to rule the world together in some type of a league. And so, with that in mind, Israel, as it sits there today, is somebody's creation, ultimately with the intent of using it as a piece, a pawn, a piece in the game, to create a world conflict, a stumbling block for the whole world that brings the whole world to a World War III around religious issues, of which then they can step into the aftermath out of chaos, order, and declare some kind of a peace for the world, by neutralizing all three religions and taking control of religion, putting somebody on a throne to rule over all three religions from Jerusalem and to make it sort of an international city for their purposes. That's the plan. So you look at everything related to Israel within the light that is this God's creation, and he put Israel there, and this is the reconstituted Israel of the Bible. No, it's a political creation by people. Look, I can just tell you right now, the Rothschild family in total, the Rockefeller family, these are not people that have um, normal religious views or objectives within what they do. These are people that are, in fact, Luciferian, worship Lucifer literally. That's why, for example, at the UN, this creation of the Rockefellers, where did the money come from? Lucis Trust. What was they had a little religious area for a chapel inside the UN. It was called the Lucis Chapel. Yeah, that's not Christ. That's not God in heaven. That's not even anything to do Muslim, Jew, any of that. That's this little secret society of Lucifer worshippers, the light bringer. The Green Man goes by 1,000 names of male and female presents. So Israel is what's going on right now is they're being used to create conflicts that will be useful in bringing the world to World War III if they succeed. And by the way, I'll just tell you, the only person that legally has the legal right to reign and rule over Jerusalem as a royal would be Prince William. And so there's I've had that discussion many, many times. I believe that this Commonwealth operation, biggest country on the planet, hidden in plain sight, that it is the intent of these globalista to move William into a position to sit on a throne in Jerusalem. And once you kind of see the rest of the cabal tactics, that's exactly where they're going. It's not just anybody. It is Prince William.
Thank you, Juan. What a distinction of the Israel of the Bible as opposed to today's political creation from London and others. And that's an important takeaway. Save Israel for last. Well, we'll be bracing and we'll be watching. I want to switch gears, Juan. I want to talk about, you touched on it earlier.
Let me just add one little thing. John. Interesting little detail. I've told your audience and other audiences that President Trump uses the language of flags in order to communicate the language of semaphore, and over and over and over. And Melania is the primary flagstaff for the messages that President Trump wants to send out by the way she dresses. So when King
Mhm.
Charles, who did not want to come to the United States, by the way, he did not come here voluntarily. He was forced here for two specific things that he did while he was here. Uh, and so Trump was calling the shots there. But when they got here, they take this little walk through the grass. Uh, King Charles and the Queen, and then President Trump and Melania. As they're going through their little walk out into the grass, etc., Melania is seen wearing snakeskin shoes. Now, what's the relevance of that? Have you ever seen her wear anything snake on her? Well, the scripture is that we will crush the head of the serpent. We will tread on the serpents, right? The royals, the British royals, believe that they're, and the other royal families, 13 royal families, uh, they believe they're the descendants of Cain. Why 13? Because you have the 12 tribes of Israel, the descendants of Abraham. Plus, they believe they have to be included as the children of Cain, a separate bloodline. Remember, in the scriptures, go check and see if I'm right on this. Cain is never listed as a descendant of Adam. Never. Um, and there is enmity between uh, uh, the other children of Adam and then Cain. And their belief, doesn't matter if you believe it's true or not, they believe, these royals believe that Cain was the product of sex between uh, Eve and Lucifer, Satan, the devil, the green man, whatever name you want to call him this week. And after which he was cursed and made to crawl in the dust of the earth. Serpentine, okay? So when Melania is wearing the snakeskin shoes and walking through the grass in the garden there at the White House, the symbology was stepping on and crushing the head of the snake serpent. And of these families that believe that they're the reptilian race. They're human and reptilian, being the descendants of Lucifer through Cain. And so that's this hidden right in plain sight, reptilians amongst us, these alien invaders from outer space, hiding right there in plain sight. And so we tread on them. They don't tread on us. And that was the symbology of that little thing. Again, there's so many things going on right in plain sight, and yet you kind of have to have a program to understand the symbology of what's being done. President Trump's doing a masterful job of exposing these globalista in their mechanisms and countering it. Will we stop World War III? Well, maybe we can't stop it, but we can delay it. We can get advantage. We can be in a better spot. Look, they have options too. One of the things that's going on right now, we're still fighting through some missing nukes that have been refreshed. That's this whole fight. Remember the whole thing looking for nukes with all the drones and people. I think it's aliens. I think it's China, etc. Trump himself said no. They're looking for nuclear signatures. Come on, man. We're in a hell of a fight. And when I say it's a cat 2 now, you can live under the threat for the rest of your life, or you can bring it to a head once and done. Let's get it over with. And that's where we're at. We're going to fight this through. We're not going to live under these perpetual threats forever. Not going to be a Cold War forever. We're going to go in there. We're going to do the fight. By God's hand, we will win. But win or lose, it's going to be over with. We're not going to just let them continue to progress to control the world through fraudulent elections, through theft. We all that's necessary for evil to survive and prosper is that good men do nothing. So we are now taking the action needed to save the world, and that's this moment we're in. So anyway, I just wanted to add that one little bit. Sorry about that.
Well, one little bit's quite an important piece of bit. Thank you, Juan. I want to move to the subject of justice and Russiagate. Of course, we have James Comey now Perhaps Brennan and others are next. What do you see taking place in terms of justice and the process to get to justice between today and let's say the midterms as it relates to Russiagate? And can we expect anything else out of Tulsi Gabbard before she exits the stage?
Oh yeah, she's gonna release the mother load over the next few weeks, and it'll take months and months and months to dissect everything that she releases. But she's going to get these things out in the open, and then we're going to have a public discussion before the whole world. Russiagate,
Mhm.
the election frauds and theft. Remember, she was briefed, and all of the key staff within Homeland Security were briefed in small groups over many months by the people who are now testifying before federal grand juries on the global conspiracy. And she was briefed intricately. Her staff was briefed intricately, and they've been pulling out the documents, other testimony, etc. And the culmination of all that is what Tulsi's going to release before she leaves office. And there's a certain value genius to that because she's essentially a lame duck now at this point in time. And she won't be going into other politics. She'll just be taking care of her husband. Well, so she can fire at will and walk away. Um, Somebody else doesn't have to take the heat. Although I just saw that President Trump this morning named the head of Fannie Mae Freddie Mac, which is huge, 10 trillion, the property loans and all that. Uh, uh, that he's going to maintain his position there, but also be handling temporarily Director of National Intelligence position for Tulsi till President Trump names his new one. And by the way, President Trump hasn't named the replacement for Pam Bondi yet. Todd Blanche is running things over at Department of Justice. He is doing what Trump is asking him to do, and so a lot of people think he might stand a chance of getting to be the choice for Trump. But privately in other lanes, we're getting word that Peter Tickton is in fact going to be President Trump's choice to take Pam Bondi's position over at Department of Justice. Department of Justice has about 100,000 plus employees. And a couple things happened. President Trump had not been able to get his appointments through for a number of offices, including people over at the U.S. Attorney General's offices at the Department of Justice. And in a sweeping blanket vote the other day, about 3 weeks ago, over at the Senate, they confirmed 51 people in a single vote instead of having to go through person by person, one at a time, in this long delayed process that we haven't been getting people in there that Trump has needed in order to do his job as president. They said through 51 in one shot. Well, about 2/3 of those people were appointees for Department of Justice. So the momentum, the direction over at Department of Justice is shifting right now because those are the leveraged positions that will then begin to cull out some of the people in the Department of Justice that are highly politicized, and then move forward some of President Trump's agendas concerning how justice is administered at the Department of Justice. But the most important position, the director, has not been renamed to replace Bondi. About 2 weeks before Bondi's resignation was announced, Peter Tickton provided all of his underlying documentation, background stuff, etc., to the president for that position. And that has been being reviewed, and it appears at this point, my understanding and a number of other folks, that Peter Tickton is in fact the most likely one to be named by President Trump for his designee for Department of Justice. And Peter Tickton has said very emphatically that the whole place needs to be gutted out and rebuilt because it's gone way off the rails in the way that the Department of Justice is operating. And he also said in one of his interviews here a couple of weeks ago, he's presenting at the Fraud Fighters Summit here in Vegas that I'm having here in 2 weeks. He said that the most important speech of his life is likely the speech that he's going to be giving at that summit. So you'll be able, even if you're not attending in person, that'll be broadcast live. And of course, the recordings of it will be available to people. So you don't have to come to Vegas. You're going to get to hear it. He says it's likely the most important speech of his life. I'm anxious to hear what he has to say. So.
And so are the rest of us. Thank you for hosting this event. You know, there's a lot of takeaways there. It sounds like one very interesting period of time between today and the midterms concerning Peter Tickton, uh, the position as Tulsi leaves, the data dump she's going to do on the way out the door, all on the Russiagate issue. A lot going to be happening before the midterms. And that takes me to the midterms. I want to ask you about that, Juan.
Not just
Go ahead.
Russiagate, not just
Mm-hmm.
Russiagate, also on the election fraud, the 20 election fraud. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just Russiagate. The Russiagate stuff was to hamper Trump going into the 2016 election and then to block him from being able to operate as president during his first
Mm-hmm.
term. But then the 2020 election fraud is huge in what Tulsi's going to be releasing, and much of that showing Chinese interference. And by the way, who's running China remotely? The banks out of the city of London. Don't forget that. That
Mm-hmm.
China is a tool of the banking cartel that even G. Edward Griffin, what's he talk about with the creature from Jekyll Island? You have a world banking cartel, a world reserve system. It's not just the Federal Reserve, and it's run by these money monster titans to control the world. And so, what Tulsi is going to be releasing affects and goes to all of that fraudulent elections and fraudulent money and the people behind all of that. And she's got serious disclosures to do over the next few weeks that we will then take months and months to further slice and dice to put out to the world so that we can get greater clarity in exactly what occurred 2020 and what they intend to do. See, the part of this whole thing is the financial side. The intent is that if we go after them on the politics, they're going after the world on the finance. That's why China had all the boats over the communications cables, which would have stopped global commerce. And then Trump brought in all the generals and admirals and says, okay, I need a plan. These guys even so much as pass gas. How are we going to wipe them out before they get a chance to take out those communications? And then let China know, oh, yeah, by the way, we have a plan. And he did so visibly. He had all the generals in from all the key places, lets them know, yeah, that's not happening. You know, you can sit there and act like you're going to intimidate us. If you so much as pass gas, we will eviscerate all of you. Nobody's messing with the world's communication system. You live in a glass house. You think we live in a glass house? You live in a glass house. And by the way, for the Chinese leadership, we not only know where they are, we not only have ground penetrating everything. If we're going to go to war, we'll go to war. We're ready. But we also know where your mom lives. You're going to blow my mom up. We're going to blow your mom up. And we'll do her first. Just show us that you're heading that way. We're not going to wait. And we'll blow up your kids. We'll blow up your girlfriend's house. Oh, you don't, nobody knows about the girlfriend? Well, we do. Okay. They live in a glass house. China got read a warning. We're not afraid if it's going to have to come to a head militarily, better now than later, and we're ready for it. So, and by the way, just as one other little aside, John, before I let you go further, President Trump again, just the other day, stated before the whole world, I was 45, 46, although I don't want to take credit for it, and 47. I told your audience, John, numerous times, President Trump never gave up nuclear command authority. He never conceded the 2020 election. Tulsi's now going to release all this information related to the 2020 election. And when he says I was 46, although I don't want to take credit for it, It may not have been visibly in the White House Oval Office, but command authority was never relinquished. We still have President Trump maintained physical, actual command authority over the nuclear arsenal and beyond. There's other stuff that fall within that WMD classification that are very, very serious, and we have it. Letting China know we're never backing up. Why did China send all those balloons over U.S. territory that were maneuvering, by the way? They weren't just balloons, they were under control. And they went over a number of U.S. military bases. What were they looking for? They were looking for the signs that, in fact, those bases were closed up, sealed up, and not under the Biden authority. They were under President Trump's authority. Okay. I was 45, 46, although I don't want to take credit for that really, and 47. You're in a completely different environment, wartime environment, than most people in this audience have allowed themselves the luxury of considering. This is way bigger than most people have even contemplated. And I was exactly correct. And I told your audience this when nobody else out there really had a grasp of it or an understanding precisely. And I said it right from the very outset after the 2020 election.
You certainly did, Juan, and I remember calling you when the theft took place, sometime shortly after November, certainly before January, and you stated everything you stated here. You stated it emphatically back then, and here it is playing out. And boy, 2020, it ain't over yet. That little jingle holds true,
2020,
and I can't.
it's not over yet.
Well, there you have it. And it's not, folks. We can't wait for Tulsi's data drop and everything else that's coming. Juan, the midterms. I want to ask you about that. You and I had a private discussion in Bangkok a few days ago. Talk with our audience about the midterm elections coming up. Are we prepared for free and fair elections? We cannot take another stolen election. What do you see happening come midterms?
Well, I've been pretty direct with everybody. The president is very, very, very clear with those close to him that we cannot have another stolen election, that you cannot allow 2026 to the manipulators, if you will, China, all of their cohorts around the world with the machines and the ballots and everything else to prevail and steal the 2026 midterm elections. However, thus far, for example, the 107th executive order by President Trump was signed on March 25th, 2025, at 1:07 in the afternoon, by the way. And the reason that that was important is because it directed all of the county clerks around the U.S., 2,500 plus counties, and the states to go through and make sure that the voter rolls in every county in America were updated and clean of any fraudulent voters, duplicate voters, voters from the 1700s who are still alive, amazingly voting. You know, you talk about, people miss this a lot of times in the Bible. It says that when Christ rose from the dead, it says, and many others. You realize that when Christ rose from the dead, other people who had died in the previous days or weeks rose from the dead, just like Lazarus? And so it wasn't just Christ walking around, hey, what's for breakfast? Okay, showing up back home. Other people did also. It's a shocking thing to think about, but we have that going on right here in America today and have for quite some time. I remember when I was working whitewater down in Arkansas, and the guys were talking about how they sent people to graveyards around the area, and then they would get the name and address and stuff like that of people who were dead that was posted at the graveyard, and then they go vote in their name in the elections. I thought that was the craziest thing in the world, but it's very, very frequent. Well, the reality is that every year on vote season, forget Halloween a few days earlier, you have the Walking Dead voting in elections every fall a few days later. So we need to clean those voter rolls. And that's what President Trump ordered with that executive order, gave 180 days to all of the states, all of the counties to clean up the voter rolls nationally. None of that happened. The county officials, the governors, all just snubbed their nose at Trump, just like they snubbed their nose at Trump over the pardon for Tina Peters. Said you don't have any involvement in the states and you can't control it. So they can cheat within their own state, and there's nothing the federal government can do, including for federal offices and like that, is the way that they would like to say it. So the reason I mentioned that, it wasn't acted upon, it wasn't corrected, and so now we've had all of these primaries. Another big one coming up in California today, where you pick between candidates, and then the winner of the primary within the parties and independents like that, they then go on the ballot for your choices in the fall. Well, if they can fraud the primaries, then all you have is a choice between bad and worse in the general election. But it's still not the will of the people, because they get people in through the fraudulent primary stuff. That's why this is such a big deal, the primary stuff. And so if you're having fraudulent primaries right now, and that's not corrected, you could have an honest election in the fall between fraudulent candidates, the only choice you have in the fall election. Things have not stopped. My contention would be that before we actually get to election day this fall, that one way or another, President Trump is going to pause the midterm elections prior to election day. And the reason for that will be the fact that there's so much fraud occurring and they haven't been stopped, and we cannot protect America moving forward. I believe that's the case. And in the proposed executive order, 17-page executive order, which many people have written about, I asked folks within our coalition, the unauthorized, to help put together a executive order covering the election stuff for President Trump. The one that I had seen previously from 2024, I thought was woefully inadequate with everything we know. And so we did something far more comprehensive. It turned out to be 17 pages, was kind of a, anomaly, but kind of fun. And that 17-page proposed executive order for Trump to sign, which he said he's considering it and wants to sign it, and having the legal people review it to make sure that we got everything right, starts with the declaration of a national emergency concerning elections, a national security emergency, that our national security, our civil rights as voters and citizens, are under threat. And it's not a domestic threat solely. It is a global threat. It comes from outside U.S. borders, with collusion by people inside U.S. borders, both citizens and others. And so this is an act of war. To steal an election is an act of war, according to world, court types of review. And so what happens is that if China and private entity groups and the money groups behind China are trying to steal the U.S. election, that's an act of war, which triggers not a policing response, not a Justice Department response, but a military response, including military tribunals. President Trump, when he first came into office, had what's called the Law of War Manual updated, and it's a legal code by which American military operations are conducted, so that the people doing foreign operations anywhere in the world, or domestic operations, don't violate Nuremberg type standards, and that they will not find themselves in some world court being judged for their actions. So the Law of War Manual outlines what can and cannot be done in a military environment legally, according to the world standards, if you will. And in responding to a stolen election process, there's certain triggers that come into play that allow us to respond to that and take people into custody, try them in Nuremberg type trials, but in this case, at Gitmo and similar, for because a stolen election, that's the use of a different type of weapon of mass destruction. Because if you put leadership in place that aren't the will of the people, you have the chance to kill, destroy, um, a lot of mass destruction, many lives. In fact, look at Ukraine. If Trump wouldn't have gone into Ukraine, the millions of people dead, you could have blown a nuclear bomb up right there in Kiev, and you wouldn't have killed more people than this war has killed already. So the leadership does change world outcomes, and that's what we're moving towards right now. With that in mind, declaration of a national security emergency related to elections by Commander-in-Chief Trump then bypasses the normal legal processes. See, when the executive order concerning uh, cleaning up the voter rolls was signed on March 25th, the 107th executive order of this administration, and then wasn't acted on, they snubbed their nose at Trump. The courts step in, do their thing, the governors do their thing. You couldn't get anywhere. What that did was prove that within the normal legislative process, it was a captured machine. You couldn't get to justice at the Justice Department. So what Trump has to do is change hats from the police chief of police hat, which is what the presidency is. It's aimed internally, to his commander-in-chief hat to protect us against foreign threats. The stolen election of 2020 and other stuff that's gone on before and after is about foreign threats to capture control of America, America's leadership through stolen votes. It's an act of war. Defensibly, we, within what's in the law of war manual, within the rules, can respond accordingly to this act of war with a military response. President Trump can protect the civil rights, the constitutional rights of the American citizens by declaring that we have a state of emergency, we have a global and external threat against the American people, against their ability to elect people of their choice to be in control of their country, to protect their civil rights, their constitutional rights. Therefore, President Trump can declare this national security election emergency, define it, and then he takes control of how the election is run, including pausing the election, even looking at the existing primaries that have already taken place and who've been elected to be able to go on the ballot in this midterm election and say, whoa, stop, all fraudulent, we can prove it, here's the information we have, here's the way that things have been violated, including the voter rolls weren't cleaned up like they're supposed to, and declares a do-over. My personal guess is that it would require a pause, probably bare ass minimum 6 months, more realistically a year, so that people have the chance to then get themselves onto a ballot, campaign, and run for office, probably in a much shortened time frame than the current year's operation, but still a valid, legitimate period in order to get to an honest election for the midterms, which also, by extension, would delay when we have the next presidential election while we get these systems in place. It will be excruciatingly painful for many. It will be hard to watch in many cases. There will be lots of pushback and drama, but it's absolutely required if you're going to have an honest midterm and an honest next presidential election. And I believe that's exactly what's going to happen. There's going to be some kind of declaration of national security emergency related to elections. Many people have talked about that. It was right at the very beginning, because when we gained this out for this executive order, just like the way it happened with the 107th order, which wasn't acted on by the counties and the governors, until you have control of the voter rolls, and then also what's used for the election. Is it machines? Is it paper? Um, these months-long elections periods with votes cast before and even after election day and counted cannot happen. One day, hand count, paper ballot, counted where cast, small precincts, 1,500 or less. That's what you're going to have an honest election in this modern era. And to take AI out of the elections as much as possible, including the fabricated media, et cetera. And by the way, within testimony that happened before Congress several years back, Google, one of the chief administrators, said that just by the way they um, uh, run the search engines within Google, at a bare minimum, they could add or delete 15 million votes from one party to the other in a presidential campaign. That's a swing of 30 million total. And determining who gets to be president with the way that they allow you to access information. That's a huge part of this also. One day, hand count, paper ballot, counted where cast, no transporting ballots in the trunk of a police car, where it's supposedly safe, firemen guarding the bucket, grandma in her knitting basket taking votes from one side of the state to a voting center at some central location, and then cardboard over the windows. Or if you say anything about something that doesn't look right, you get kicked out of the voting center as an observer. Bullshit. There's a lot in play. President Trump is fully aware of exactly what he has to do. His role, his goal, his mission in life, the most important thing that he believes he will ever do in this world, and he intends to finish the job, honest elections, and then immediately in conjunction with that, honest money. Watch and see if it doesn't happen exactly the way it is laid out, the way that he's saying it's going to be laid out. And he himself would tell you it's in God's hands. We're doing the Lord's work to return honest elections to the people, not just of America, but of the planet. So anyway, there you go.
Thank you, Juan. You've unpacked so much there. The summary, folks, you've got an election day pause on the horizon. Number two, check out the Law of War Manual. I have it up on my website, jmcbroadcasting.com. I'm looking at it here on the screen. The Law of War Manual, as well as the National Security Strategy and the National Defense Strategy documents official from the administration. I encourage our viewers to go there. Thank you so much for all that information, Juan. And isn't it interesting, folks? The 107th executive order at 1:07 p.m. told to us today by 1:07. Anyway, fascinating, boggles the mind. You talked about free elections as a legacy for the president, as well as restoring constitutional and sound money. That takes us to a news feed that's current right now. President Trump has basically published, I'm paraphrasing, it's time to audit Fort Knox. They floated this a while back. Here it is. Looks like it could be happening soon. We have the issuance of a new treasury, a gold-backed, commodity-backed dollar on the very near horizon. We've got the dismantling and repositioning of the Federal Reserve and the IRS. Talk with us about these things to kind of pull the string on it for everybody. And then I'd like to have you weigh in on UFOs.
Well, within the idea of honest money, constitutionally, the currency is minted gold and silver coin. You can have a receipt for that with a currency note or certificate, but just a receipt for gold and silver on deposit, as opposed to just backing it. That's what the fiat means. Just a perceived notion of, but not convertible into anything tangible of value. That's not constitutional. That's the Federal Reserve System. You're paying interest on vaporous money as though you owe interest on something that's fiat. It's not real. And so, what President Trump is doing is laying the groundwork to return to honest money. And within the context of that, the Bretton Woods Accords, going back to post World War II, setting the value of gold at 42.22 dollars, US dollars. And the dollar is still fixed to that value within the way our accounts are held within the country. Part of the audit is to make sure that the gold's actually still there. And then in the course of that, what's the true value of gold based on the number of dollars that are out in circulation? And by the way, you have pallets and 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 pallets of Federal Reserve notes planted all over the world, 25, 50, and $100 million uh, uh, amounts of dollars on these pallets, supposedly secured. They're everywhere. They've been put out by numerous administrations. It's a complete fraud against the world. Had Hillary won, the intention was to flood the world with dollars, to remove the ability of people around the world to rely and trust in the dollar's value, including American citizens, and then move us into a digital currency and trades, which could then be tied to a social standard. Are you spending your life energy in ways that benefit the machine? And if you don't, then you get penalized. Your carbon credit score, etc. And in this global new world order machine machination. That's been thwarted. They have not pulled that off. And in fact, while there's people still trying to transact those pallets, we've been tracking them. We know where they are. And we're not going to allow this to continue to go the direction they had planned, Hillary and crew and these Globalista and these others out of the City of London. They're not going to get to foist all of those fake false dollars on the market the way they had intended to. It's going to be gold, going to be silver, it's going to be real, and if there's receipts for it, we're gonna know the true numbers from the audit, and then there is a mechanism for revaluing the gold. I believe it'll be something just north of $20,000 an ounce, and silver also at a higher value, yet to be determined because it's a strategic metal. And so there's a bit of a discussion there that's going on. Vice President Vance is leading that discussion. I've talked about it other times pretty extensively. And then also there is in the ground wealth of various types that, including gold and silver, that would have to be extracted, minted, and then made available, and that process requires a time component. So it may be that in this resetting of the dollar, this moving back to Treasury operations from Federal Reserve operations, of which G. Edward Griffin's going to provide some amazing insight in a few days, and in his new book, and showing the path forward for us, we will control much of the economy of the world against this fiat club being run out of the City of London, the city within the city, and their global operations. We will take control of that with honest money. So it's honest elections to get the leadership in place, honest money to move forward, not just for America, but for the entire planet. So we're having honest trade, people trading their life energy through labor to make and do things with other people all across the world on an even playing environment with a medium of exchange, which itself is honest, not fiat. gold and silver, according to the U.S. Constitution.
Thank you, Juan. I want to follow up a couple of points on that. And just to clarify what you've said, folks, we're talking about resetting the value of gold, perhaps to 25,000 an ounce. That duly noted.
Well, not
Juan,
25.
you and I talked
Not
about
25.
silver.
Not 25. Hold on, not 25. Something north of $20,000. Not
I guess I
25.
wanted 25. Okay, thank you. North of 20,000, I'll take it. You and I talked about silver in Bangkok and that a floor may be set for silver being a rare mineral now. Can you back up the reason why there could be a floor set for silver? Spend a second on that, if you will.
Well, silver is a strategic metal. There's really no replacement for silver within the use in electronics, not just for consumer stuff, but for military. From a cost effectiveness uh, side, gold does similar things, but it's so much more expensive. It really doesn't work well for a strategic material for, the world's going more and more digital and it'll continue to do so. At the current prices, under $100, it just doesn't work for U.S. mining companies to go after silver specifically. In fact, to decide to dive in and go for it, it's closer to almost $300 an ounce that mining companies would need to go after it in mass. There's some locations that could go after it at lower prices, but again, uh, public policy has not favored mining of silver here in the U.S. So we've had reclamation stuff. It's a legacy of other types of mining that you get some silver. Most of it's been coming in from outside the country, but our national security relies on silver at decent market prices and our availability to get it without having to go through other choke points across the world. In order to have mining companies decide that they are going to go target silver volume, which would allow us then on the electronics, the technology, to move into, again, a dominant position in the world as far as technology, development of technology, export of technology, as well as our own uses, you need silver. And the current pricing isn't turning on the spigot for companies to go after silver specifically. So the discussion is, what's the number? There's a number that are negotiating that would like that floor that the U.S. government would pay for silver in long-term contracts for mining companies down there at around 240. There's others would like it as high as 320. I personally think it'll be somewhere south of 280, but pretty close to 280 as that floor. Depends a bit on what kind of relationships we get with certain trading partners such as Canada, Mexico, other places. If we get the right trade agreements and lightening some of the tariffs, then you could see it closer to 240. But I think that under any circumstance, silver ultimately resolves to some number well north of 200. And there's some people out there saying that because of all these things, silver is going to be several thousand an ounce, etc. The reality is that there might be a short-term squeeze for silver. Remember, Trump is turning on the industrial base of America. We're going back to manufacturing. We're going back with this reindustrialization of America, things that were sent to other parts of the world to do, and leaving the American youth with competing for, manual labor type jobs and service sector jobs. We're going back to education, um, complex industrial market, and real futures for the American youth, including space with near and further out space operations. As that happens, we need massive quantities of silver. And so turning on a strategic from inside the U.S. production of silver. We have lots of silver, but it costs money to go get. There's also going to go do it and have a number that's high enough that justifies building a business around going after silver, and specifically. And there's other metals that we need also. So with domestic production. So that's what the discussions are. It's not just silver. The discussions that Vice President Vance is having with industry leadership are around a number of strategic metals, and silver just got re-added to that list as a strategic metal for the purpose of those discussions. The U.S. government then setting a floor of pricing and negotiations to purchase at that pricing for U.S. government, for military, etc., which then allows these companies to negotiate into the open market, knowing that they have a base of getting this amount of money for silver. That's what the government pays for it in order to ensure that we have a steady, quality supply of silver that originates domestically inside the United States. Nobody else can shut off on a whim like China seeks to do.
Such important information. Thank you, Juan. I have a couple of quick follow-ups on this financial matter before we touch on UFOs and close out with your statement on the EBS. I'd like to follow up with this. Crystal ball question. When do you believe the new Treasury note that the Treasury Department's talked about on March 26th and the president's been speaking about, when the new Treasury note comes out, will we still have Federal Reserve notes? Will there be two notes in circulation? I got two more questions.
Well, we've had multiple previously. Remember, President Kennedy put out the silver certificate, and that was competing with the Federal Reserve note. That was the silver certificate was put out by the Treasury. He was trying to accomplish this very thing, and then people could vote by preference. And what would be the context for putting stuff out? The president, for example, if the U.S. government's paying for silver, are they going to pay for it with a Federal Reserve note that we then have to pay interest on and buy back our place from the Federal Reserve? No, we're gonna do it with Treasury notes. And so, for example, people get their Social Security check with a Treasury note, not a Federal Reserve note. The banking system as it exists today across the world, and specifically in America, is all based around Federal Reserve Bank affiliations. And so all of the banks that you're looking at right now, and by the way, that's why I had the bond conference there in Vegas a couple months ago, looking at how the banking system here in America is set up and the bond frauds, specifically, precisely in the majority school bonds tied to property and property taxes. The banks trading those like baseball trading cards, those bonds. The fix after 2008 with the financial crisis into the banking system was that all of the banks had to carry government issued and insured protected bonds. And so, over 60% of the holdings of banks are bonds issued by the U.S. government here in these U.S. entities. Well, if you have a bond crisis, which you're going to have, it's going to be epic, it's going to be unbelievable, tied to the fraudulent issuance and interest rates and everything else of bonds, especially tied to school bonds. When they collapse, when school districts start going into bankruptcy, which they're going to, they already started, and they're tied to the banks, you're going to take out 600 banks in America in a matter of hours. Most likely, it could be days, but whatever. It's a huge, by extension, smaller regional banks, which have interesting names, development finance banks. When we had all the mischief in Arkansas and 11 other states back during Whitewater, the money was being laundered through development finance authorities, somehow connected to state because they were guaranteed bond issues by the state listed in the markets. but it was really a money laundering operation for three-letter agencies and financial groups. These development finance banks are at the core of much of what's going on, and they'll take down everybody with them. It's like putting a boat anchor around a life preserver. Okay, it's not going to work. And the fix after 2008 was essentially to mandate that all the banks must carry this toxic stuff for the stress test to survive, under the presumption that these government-backed bonds can never fail, that if they did start to fail, the federal government would step in and back them up. Well, under Hillary, that's exactly what would have happened. And it would have flushed the American financial system. We're fighting that in the background. The president's fighting that. The Treasury's fighting that. And these Federal Reserve notes tied to these Federal Reserve banks and a banking system built around the Federal Reserve are going to get into a serious conundrum. As the U.S. government pays all of its debts and obligations, public and private, using Treasury notes or certificates tied to real gold and silver revalued at a more appropriate current value price, then naturally the market will prefer those notes. And so those people holding on to Federal Reserve notes domestically and internationally will begin to gravitate. The collapse will happen pretty steadily and relatively quickly as more and more people realize that we're serious about this and not backing down. As we pay our obligations in that way, the retirees getting their Social Security check in a Treasury note are going to have favor with everything, merchants, etc., compared to those that are trying to price and get repaid in Federal Reserve notes. Pay your note mortgage off with cheap Federal Reserve notes and keep your retirement money in U.S. Treasury notes.
Fascinating time and transition. Two quick follow-ups. We're going to get into UFOs. The crystal ball question, I understand that as the premise. This new Treasury note, when can we expect to see that? There's a narrative. A lot of folks feel it could be before July 4th, some towards the end of the year. Where do you stand in the crystal ball world on the issuance in our hands of new Treasury notes?
It's bullshit to say it's going to happen before July 4th. That's a pipe dream. Totally false.
Okay.
There's a lot that still has to be done, including the revaluation of gold. You haven't even done the audit to know what we have to price against. And probably most all of that would occur after a legitimate Congress comes into power post midterm elections, which may not even occur on time. So that's far off in the future, but by far off, I don't mean decades. I mean, year and a half, 2 years.
Well, thank you. Very important. Duly noted. And one last question on the financial front.
And by the way, hold on. Let me add one thing here, John. Hold on.
Sure.
All the more reason why people need to understand you're in a bridge moment. All the key power players around the globe know this is coming in reality. Trump hasn't actually been hiding it. The Senate hasn't actually been hiding where they intend to go. So with that in mind, you're caught in the crossfire. It's like you're in France and the French resistance is fighting the Nazis and the Allies are showing up all over the place and people are parachuting in, coming in on gliders, coming off the beaches. Unless you're well armed and have the right information, your best option is to hunker down, get your head below the line where it's going to get lopped off by a stray bullet. And that means understanding that whatever you're having and holding as you've traded your life energy for something. Is it tangible? Is it real? Will it survive this moment?
Mhm.
Some people have Picassos. Some people have classic cars. In a world going to electric cars and autonomous cars, your classic car might not be as valuable if it's a Camaro and a retractable or something as some of the more exotic classics of art. They may actually go down in value because you got to have a place to put it, keep it intact. It costs money, etc. So I enjoy the classic cars. I've got quite a few, but you might want to think about, is it just for the end of your lifetime, or are you saving it for the grandkids? Are you going to have a place to put it? Is it going to be somebody's coffee table in the future? Is your house going to have enough room? You have an apartment on the 10th floor. You might not have room to display your car as a coffee table. Okay, so there's a lot of things go into that. Then again, there's guys like Leno. He's collecting things that will be pieces of art. Right now, you know, with the 10 billion people on the planet or whatever the real number is, um, when there was only a quarter, of that, there was only so many people seeking these pieces of art. You see very rare Ferrari GTOs going for $50 million plus, $150 million. There'll be a time when there'll be the first car that sells for $1 billion because it's so rare, but it's a piece of art. It might be in our lifetime, might be in your kid's lifetime, but that doesn't mean that every car is going to be that way. They might become boat anchors moving forward, and the kids don't want anything to do with it because it just takes up space, and it's hard to maintain, and it's deteriorating. So it goes away. In that kind of a mentality, how are you holding your wealth? Is it for short term or long term? Having silver or gold as opposed to Federal Reserve notes in this moment of transition is getting your head down below the line of fire, hunkering down. And then when things turn back on again on the far side of this, if the Constitution says that the only currency is minted gold and silver coin, of which you can then get a receipt, um, but it doesn't make the receipt currency. It makes it a receipt for gold and silver that you can then trade the receipt, good as the gold and silver. But it's still gold and silver. If you're trying to get out of the way before all of this happens, going to gold and silver in this environment could probably make sense. The other side of the coin is if you're a farmer, maybe you just get a new tractor because when they come back with the new tractors and you need one 2-3 years, maybe they cost 2 or 3 times what they cost right now. So maybe it's a great investment. Uh, uh, Maybe the collector cars cost half as much because there's a glut of them out there because people are moving away from them because it's hard to get gas 50 years from now. Everything's electric. And we have nuclear power and other power generation to keep those cars going, and they're autonomous. You're afraid to let your kid drive the car even to the parade. Why? Because they don't drive every day. The machine drives. The car or the plane drives. You'll be toxic. You'll be dangerous on the road. So you just have to think about that. What am I going to hold as something of value? What am I going to place my remnant of my life energy? You trade hours, days, months of your life in this world that you cannot buy back for any sum of money. I have someone that's listening right now, probably in their last hours, maybe days of life in this world. Nothing they can do to buy it back or any day of it back. And it's represented with things that you've traded that life energy for that you hope to leave as a legacy to your children, to a spouse. Um, if you choose well, there'll be something for them. And Scripture says a wise man, a blessed man, leaves an inheritance for his children's children. In other words, your great grandchildren. That you have that much wealth that you've set aside in an intelligent way, so they have a nut to start with, something to take their energies, apply their life energy to, and move forward and have a future and a hope, a blessing. Um, That's why these monsters, by the way, want to have an inheritance tax that makes it so you cannot give anything to your children, your children's children, because they don't want you to be able to bless future generations. They want to run those generations, and that's why that's a fraud. It's unscriptural. It's anti God in heaven, and so if you have wealth denominated in Federal Reserve notes, and you know there's a war on there, this is the time where you go, okay, you know what? My retirement's in this. It's in the markets. The markets are tied to that. Maybe I have to pause, get out of the way. And then the most important part that many people miss, you don't bury it under your house. You don't disappear it somewhere forever. It's a pause moment. There's a moment in time when you're going to want to step back into the American markets, or it might even be right now with where you put your money, not into gold and silver, but into something that has a future, that's tangible, that's got a moment coming because of the way America is going to turn back on with its reindustrialization, with the things that President Trump has in play. Maybe you have some unique skill. I had friends in from Amsterdam that we met with yesterday, and they do a certain type of technology within the internet. And so they've put everything into building out that technology for what's about to happen, not what's happening this second, but what's about to happen, to be perfectly positioned in markets around the world based on what President Trump is doing in America, and to take their technology forward. They're not buying gold and silver. They're investing in stuff they know that they have put years of their life energy into and education into to get to this moment in time, and that's their investment. Pick wisely. And if you don't have that ability, that skill, then silver and gold may be the fallback position that it's still unclear. You don't have a clear understanding, sight forward for what these next moves are, then you take a pause. It's not unwise. Let the dust settle and then go into it. These people that are making their choices out of Amsterdam, they're risking it all on their particular bet. They think they're right. I think they're right too, but it's not guaranteed. And there is competing technologies that could make theirs the wrong choice, and they'd lose everything, have to start over. They're making a bet. If you don't have the desire to gamble too wildly, gold and silver makes sense because they're still have industrial use. They're not just art like a car or a painting. They aren't. They have industrial value that people need that in order to move forward in this next era. When instead of having 10 billion people around, you got 20 or 50 billion people, and half of them are living above you, not next to you, near space and beyond. Are you going to want to take your 41 Oldsmobile convertible and transport it to the space station and have it on display up there? Is that even going to be possible? Is anybody else going to really care? You might enjoy it as a piece of art, but how many of them can you have? As other people pare down, as the world goes other places. Maybe there's enough for everybody, because instead of 10 million people wanting that piece of art, you got 50 billion. Okay? And 100 years from now, just like we treasure certain artifacts, old things today from 2, 3, 5, 20 centuries ago, and it has great value. Some of these things will have great value in the future, including art or other things. Pick wisely.
Quickly, so as I summarize the financial section of our discussion, what we've learned a lot, but one of the things I'd like to say, clearly, the school bonds, the municipal space, you've got a warning there. We have a Federal Reserve note that will undoubtedly over time come down as the new Treasury note goes up. Talk with us very briefly, if you will. Where does real estate stand during this transition, and where do stocks stand during this transition? Some folks say we'll have a controlled demolition. Some say it'll just be a minor correction. Some say it'll go to 60,000. Where do you stand on stocks and real estate during the transition?
Oh, I think stock markets continue to go up. But part of that is because the value of the Federal Reserve notes that you're pricing it in goes down. It takes more of them. Remember, the stock market represents real buildings, real estate, technologies, patents, aircraft, machines. So you could have the stock market go up in Federal Reserve note pricing, but in reality, what are those Federal Reserve notes buying you after the fact? And then what's the taxes you're paying on the increase? Is that a valid thing? So there's all sorts of things going into the equation. And then, by the way, you talk about real estate. Real estate was always a great investment for people, but I've lived through personally 5 revaluations, major revaluations in real estate, and I witnessed it up close and personal. Um, Properties that people said would never ever go down in value, waterfront and things like that, and yet in real crunches, dropping, north of 40%. In some cases, even as much as 60%. And where is that property located? One of the things that virtually nobody in this audience, I'll bet you 1 or 2 people might have even caught this. I had, and what's going to be presented here in 2 weeks. The legal minds are saying that the president is going to have control of the property taxation in America. Literally, there's going to have to be a national mandate and to take property taxing away from the counties and all these other entities, the states, and federalize them. In other words, you wouldn't pay property tax anymore on property you have anywhere in America. Industrial, personal residence, anything, no more property tax. And that state by state, they're going to have a sales tax tied to the transactions in order, and it'll have to be pretty high. I mean, 12 to 20% or more, depending on which state you're talking about, as a sales tax on other transactions in order to pare down quickly the numbers on the debt obligations tied to current property taxes, school bond taxes, etc. And this is, virtually, it's the craziest thing in the world. Most people are like, what in the world are you talking about? We all have to pay property taxes. The reality is, through fraud, these property taxes have been being moved up radically. These valuations changed arbitrarily by people in the various jurisdictions illegally, the way. And so what's going to have to happen from pricing collapse due to fraudulent taxes and all the court stuff that would go with that. A moratorium on new property taxes tied to school bonds or anything else, municipal, etc. And then the payoff coming in some type of a sales tax tied to the region where these taxes have been incurred by these authorities, ultimately by the states primarily. And then Trump can help take the edge off of that and maybe reduce those to a more bite-sized number, because the numbers are just, if you look at them, it would just stop a lot of commerce. By the assets that are seized, financial and otherwise, including lands, from these people conducting human trafficking, not sex trafficking, the way most people would think of it normally, human trafficking in the way of imposing taxes on people, taxing their life like they're a slave, and bring those funds back to the people who had them stolen from them. And so once you get to the position of um, remove property taxes from the property owners and making it an obligation state as in that region. And then with assistance federal level from the president with seized assets to down those obligations to a more manageable size. That's what the discussion ultimately is. But imagine for anybody that owns a house or a business property, apartments, condominiums, etc. What would your costs be if you eliminate these fraudulent property taxes? And what would happen to the valuations of the property you have? See, if you're in an environment where these properties are overpriced, if you remove the property taxes um, and the threat of seizure of your property for not paying the taxes, the values of the property probably don't just stay the same. They may very well go up. And so it's we're trading one monster out to put something legitimate in as we move forward to protect and preserve property values. If you have a collapse in property values, it affects the whole economy, the country, the stock markets, retirements, everything so horrendously. And the other thing that should be in that equation is you have a lot of people here in America that are still being moved out. We're far from done in sending people back home to their countries of origin and then bringing people back into America through appropriate controlled immigration, which we do want more people here in the country. I've got friends that took their whole family out. A friend I've mentioned before in some of the shows took his whole family out to back to Mexico. 21 people. They had a farm or ranch that he'd been paying for years here. He was here for over 20 years. I didn't know he's an illegal. Ran a legitimate business, been doing business with me, pulls me aside, and we had a private conversation. He says, look, here's the situation. And I told him, I said, you know, I'd moved before everybody else. You got a place to go. Because if you get picked up, then you're barred for life from coming back to the country. Leave, apply to come back in legitimately through the front door correctly. And so this friend took 21 family members and went back to Mexico. Uh, uh, Two of the kids who were students have already been accepted back into the U.S. under immigration visas and returned to school. They were afraid that they were going to be out forever. We're going to shuffle the deck. People are going to have to leave the country. Probably a majority of those people will come back in, but they'll come back in a controlled environment where we know who they are. They have legitimate place here, and they want to be American. They want to work with us from a business side legitimately. It's actually going to help them, and they need a place to live. So there's a window here where we may not have the demand on private property, apartments, condos, and business locations that we had. And those properties are going to be in flux. Look at any downtown area of any city in America right now, big or little, as well as other cities around the world. And these business hubs are, you know, at a fraction of what they were occupancy-wise just a few years ago before COVID. Will it ever return to the same thing again? I think it will. A lot of that stuff will actually get brought back in. But it's a process. The people buying those business properties are taking them at very reduced values and betting on the future, and they have to maintain them in the meantime. Or they may be old technology that doesn't heat and cool as efficiently, maybe just out of the best area to work in. Maybe the new area is 5 miles away, 10 miles away from the city center, better roads, better streets. Look at Seattle. They built this huge monorail system up there that everybody was advising them against. And they've created an obligation for the taxpayers that's to outer space, and they're moving a fraction of the population they're supposed to do. And then all these government entities go in there, start looking, and they're finding fraud to outer space with government officials. Absolutely unbelievable amounts of fraud. Same thing in LA with the trains to nowhere. They spend $15 billion, and the train system will never get built from San Francisco to LA. It'll never get built because there's no use for it. And yet they've spent $15 billion. They were headed on spending 300 billion or more, and it'll never get built. So who's going to service those bonds? Where are you going to get the money to service those bonds that are government bonds issued under a certain understanding, and then you're not going to build those trains to nowhere? How's that going to get sorted out, let alone education fraudulent school administrators?
Okay, Juan, you're with us. Thank you. You've unpacked so much. Great change, folks, is underway with dangers and opportunities strewn throughout. So stay tuned to broadcasting and follow Juan as he gets out and about there as well. Juan, we're winding this down. I appreciate your time. Two quick subjects to take on. Obviously, one of them you can go on. We could talk about quite a bit, but we'll save that for another day. But UFOs, or Area 51, off-planet, off-world related activity. The president now has begun releasing information. These files, as I understand, have been there and increased upon since Dwight D. Eisenhower. What's your 40,000-foot view comment about the timing and the importance of this?
It has always been part of the globalist agenda to fake an alien landing, if you will, to control the world through those frauds. For example, the Phoenix Lights, very famous, that was all a projection. It was a very complex Project Bluebeam type of thing, and it was intended to test the technology as well as public response, and also tune people up to begin to accept the idea that somebody else is out here. Remember the WikiLeaks material with the communications between John Podesta and Hillary Clinton. John Podesta being her campaign manager, and when it was clear she was on a track to lose the 2016 presidential election to President Trump, now President Trump, candidate Trump then, she says to him, "Is it time to play the alien card?" Okay, there's a lot of things you have to think about that. So that's actually a card that she or John Podesta would have access to play, that they could call on cohorts to play. Was the election 2016 important enough that that card should be played to protect this globalista agenda, which required Hillary getting into office? Maybe they thought they could take Trump out other ways, and it was too early to play that card. They hadn't advanced the conversation far enough. There was too much at risk, such a thing to play. By the way, the secretary to Braun, going back to say the Apollo go to the moon program, etc. His secretary has stated publicly that before he died, Werner von Braun told her of several things that were the intent of the people who were controlling world events, of which the culmination of them was going to be a fake alien landing, a la something like Independence Day, and that the world would have to come together to counter this threat. We talk about aliens and different races, one of them being the reptilian race, hidden in plain sight. Well, they're having a laugh at you. That's the royal families claiming their heritage back to Cain as a descendant of Lucifer, hiding in plain sight, and all human. They don't consider themselves less than human if they're of mixed blood. They consider themselves more than human. So with that in mind, is there aspects of this that all tie together? By the way, Aleister Crowley, go check it out, see if I'm not right. The first gray, which in low light, it's the little green man, but it's the light so low it looks gray, with the big eyes and everything else. Aleister Crowley said that was his demon that communicated with him, even drew the picture of it. And so the first gray, it didn't come from a sci-fi book, it came from a Satanist. Okay? And within that, is there other technology? Yes, yes, yes. The Bhagavata out of India which goes to a time, a pre-Adam or pre-Adamic time, prior to Adam and Eve. Uh, there's all sorts of ancient architecture here on the earth that seems to show very clearly that we have some prior history of humanoids, not necessarily human descendants of Adam, um, but humanoid here on the earth and out throughout our solar system. With that in mind, are there other races? Even in the Book of Enoch, go read it. Go read the Book of Enoch. By the way, there's two. There's the Enoch that was descendant of Seth, and there was an Enoch that was descendant of Cain. So you kind of got to sift through that a little bit. And they're not scripture because they were not maintained in their original form without other people over the eons sifting little extra pieces of information in or out. So you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt, more like poetry than God-inspired scripture. But with that in mind, the Book of Enoch, and what he describes are spheres in their courses, planets in their courses, Titan with these giant watchers. Watchers. What are you talking about, watchers? Well, they're in the scripture. There was entities, beings that were watchers, observing the goings on uh, here on the earth and humanity. The Titans were silent because they were under judgment, and they didn't want to do anything to incur greater judgment than they already were going to face before God Almighty, the Creator. And so they were silent, stoic, awaiting their judgment, not wanting to increase their punishment. Um, are there other entities? Well, it'd be a waste of space for God not to have other stuff out there. So, yes, I believe there is other stuff, but most all of the discussion, my personal opinion, is people positioning to control the narrative of people across the world through false media, controlled information in order to fake an alien agenda. And the scripture says that all the world will be deceived in some type of a mass deception in the end times, that even the elect, those that are living by faith before God in Christ, saved, uh, that even the elect would be deceived if it were possible. The only way to see through some of these deceptions from a scriptural standpoint is by a direct connection with God Almighty above. That whatever ploys they try to play on you to control how you think, what you believe, is in direct relationship with God Almighty, so that you will have spiritualized to see through the deceptions at these key moments that others would ploy to foist upon the people of the earth, including a false Christ coming to end all war, a Prince of Peace who's a false Prince of Peace, sitting on a legal throne in Jerusalem, which was part of the Balfour Declaration, that the British royal family retains the legal right to place a sovereign on the throne in Jerusalem when it's reconstituted a state at their will, at their whim, at their leisure. And if you look at the scriptures, it says that the Antichrist, uh, through a covenant, a 7-year covenant, peace covenant, takes a seat on the throne in Jerusalem. Why? Because there's a great war, and then they got to have somebody preside over it so there's no religious war for a period of time. It's all there. And by the way, from that crowd, they'll claim that the royal families are in fact descendants of the alien cousins, and therefore have the right to rule by blood because they're, they've been placed here amongst us for our protection. A lot of themes along those lines in the sci-fi movies and all that. And as I've mentioned to your audience before, I have a huge sci-fi collection of books and magazines like that, and so it's fun to look at how the science fiction writers have visualized past, present, future within all of these themes. So,
Thank you. Thanks for weighing in on that. And a quick announcement, and then we'll close out the broadcast. I'm launching Off-World with JMC with a panel of a revolving panel of experts and people weigh in on this issue. So stay tuned for that. It's coming up in about a week or two. And thanks for your views and comments on that, Juan. EBS, last question. There's a lot of folks. What's that? Yeah, the EBS.
Just
Let me just cut to the
magnitude of
chase.
the deception. Oh, well, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, we got some audio. Let me get the question out. You're right, magnitude of deception. Look, it's been floated about an EBS forever. Next Tuesday at 3, next Wednesday at 4. It's not happening today. What is happening, and when will the EBS be launched in your crystal ball, and in what ways will it be deployed and used?
Well, you have to understand what's the purpose. When it's done, is it to stop the bad guys from being able to communicate fraudulent information, to communicate in the open, to anticipate where we may be taking people into custody or things like that? Is it because of a nuclear threat? Is it because you have to turn off the cell systems and reprogram them because they've been weaponized? I've talked about that before. There's a lot of overlapping issues going on here. So the EBS occurs within the context of several different things all happening at the same time, that shutting things off, like resetting the VCR's clock, is flashing 12, 12, 12. Shutting it off and restarting it, rebooting it back to factory settings or to new settings because the factory settings are dangerous. It all plays into this, including from a strategic military perspective, not just here in the U.S. but globally. And by the way, if you think you're going to be okay with your satellite phone, what, you think we don't have the ability to shut off the satellite communications? Briefly, that's why Space Force is in play. You know, we may very well have to do some resetting there too, but it doesn't mean you're going to be able to communicate just because you got a satellite phone. Deep breaths. There's a lot in play here. Prayer required, by the way, because this has been gamed out extensively for a very long time, decades, to get to a winning position to take over away from these globalista that want to seize the world with their one world government and everything else. With that in mind, and by the way, let me just add this one little thing. In the scriptures, this Antichrist figure, there's a peace agreement for 7 years where they sit on the throne in Jerusalem. But halfway through, there's a threat arises out of what is modern day Crete and Greece, and that comes as on eagle's wings against this sovereign on the throne reigning over Jerusalem, the supposed Prince of Peace. So much so that that entity person has to.
We've lost Juan. He's back. Juan, can you weigh in? We've lost audio on you, Juan. Okay, if Juan chimes back in, we'll wrap up with Juan. Interrupt me, Juan, if you can speak. We don't hear you. But anyway, folks, Eyes on Gitmo is a monthly panel with retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt, retired Lieutenant Colonel Matt Meck, Juan's Chief of Staff, Captain Pete Matizou, and Juan Savin. We broadcast this panel each and every month. We'll be talking about in that panel the justice that's happening, the justice that's coming, the Nuremberg 2 trials, as well as the launching of the Media Center from Gitmo, where we'll be getting reporting live and otherwise from Gitmo. We'll be getting into all of that in the next monthly panel, Eyes on Gitmo. Again, Juan Savin frequents that panel as well. In fact, he helped me set it up and made the introductions for me to General Holt, Captain Pete, and Matt Mack. If Juan does come back to my producer, interrupt me, patch him in. If not, I want to thank Juan Ostet. Juan, you still with me?
Yeah, I am. I had a call came in. It screws up with all the settings. I
Oh, okay.
apologize.
So close us
So,
out on the EBS. We got some of your points there. Anything else?
well, the whole point is that it could play in at several different places. Exactly how it's used. If you conveyed every aspect of how it was going to be used to the enemies, maybe it wouldn't be as
Right.
effective. So we have
Of course.
options. There's different ways it can be played in. How exactly that happens is to be determined. So you can kind of weigh in how does it
Understood.
affect you? What are you going to do in the meantime? As long as you understand that, maybe you can take appropriate measures to be ready. And it's not going to be for years. It's not even going to be for months. That EBS is a cutoff of systems. You're not going to go to the gas station and use your credit card to buy gas. You're not probably going to be able to buy it with cash. And if you did, where are you going? Nobody else can communicate either. It's a pause. Planetary society. Take a breath, relax. So, anyway.
Understood. Well, thank you, Juan.
Yes, have
And
some
it's
things
nice
for a
to
few days or weeks. Have some supplies
Yeah,
for a few days, a week or two. But
absolutely. Cash, food, water, medicine, essentials, toiletries, good advice. Know your neighbors, know your sheriff, and pray, plan, and prepare. Juan, we're going to wrap the show up. You've really provided a treasure trove of valuable information and really good analysis of where we are and where things may be heading. And I greatly appreciate it. And I'm glad we're on the same time zone. Makes it easy for us to do a broadcast. Good seeing you here in my neck of the woods in Bangkok. You and your beautiful wife, Jennifer. It was a wonderful meeting we had. And before you go, Juan, I published some of the photos of you and I, of course, our shoes and the other, our handshake where your ring was prominently displayed. Why don't you tell everybody the truth about your ring, if you will, before we wrap up this broadcast?
uh, probably too long of an explanation for here, but it represents
Okay,
victory. It was something that I've talked about other places, but sometime I'll do that.
no
I
problem.
have a critical call that's coming in right now that I've got to take. In the meantime, your people
Thank you,
should go over to
Juan.
the Gumroad site, get a Tina Peters coin, and we'll talk about Tina here shortly. But I've got to take this call. It's an emergency, and love you all, appreciate you, and look